My name's Ryan. I'm 23, work part-time at an auto parts warehouse, and live in a quiet suburb just outside of Austin. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills while I finish my associate degree in graphic design. I don't get involved in people's business. I stay out of drama. I keep things simple. That's probably why Marcus always said I was the most dependable guy he knew. Marcus and I weren't best friends, but we'd been close in high school, football team, late-night Taco Bell runs, weekends spent gaming. We drifted a little since he moved out of his mom's place and in with his girlfriend downtown, but we still talked, still texted, still called each other bro, in that way guys do when they've been through enough locker rooms together. So when he messaged me out of nowhere one Tuesday afternoon, I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. Hey man, random favor? My mom's heater's out and I've been meaning to drop off an electric one I had at my place, but I'm slammed. Think you could take it over? I stared at the message for a second, shrugged, and replied, yeah, sure. He sent me her address again. I remembered it from high school and told me the heater was already packed in a box on his porch. I didn't think twice, just swung by, grabbed the box, and drove out to the familiar street with the tall trees and crooked mailboxes. The sun had already started setting. One of those warm orange Texas evenings that looks prettier than it feels. It had been years since I'd seen Marcus's mom. Miss Carter, Vanessa, I think, though I'd never called her that. She was probably in her early 40s now, maybe mid. I remembered her being reserved, always kind to us but quiet. The type who kept the house clean even when it didn't need to be and made really good iced tea without ever asking us to drink it. I parked out front and walked up the short brick pathway, the heater box tucked under one arm. The porch light flicked on as I stepped onto the doormat. I rang the bell and waited. No answer at first. I shifted my weight, about to knock again, when the door creaked open slowly, and there she was. She looked different, but not in a bad way. Her hair was longer now, dark brown with streaks of lighter shades caught in the soft light, pulled loosely over one shoulder. She wore a navy blue cardigan over a simple top and leggings, her feet bare, toenails painted. She looked comfortable, home in her space. Her eyes widened just slightly when she saw me. Ryan? She asked, tilting her head. Hey, Miss Carter. Marcus asked me to bring this over. Said your heater was out. She blinked once, then smiled. Oh, right. Yes. Thank you. She stepped back, holding the door open. Come in, please. I hesitated just for a moment, then stepped inside. The house smelled the same. Warm, clean, like citrus and something deeper, maybe cedar or old books. The furniture hadn't changed much either. Still the same tan sofa, framed pictures on the wall, a candle flickering near the TV. You can just set it down by the hallway, she said gently. I'll get to it later. I placed the box where she pointed and turned back toward her. She was watching me with a kind of thoughtful expression, not analyzing, just observing. It's been a long time, she said softly. You've grown. I smiled, unsure what to say. Yeah, I guess so. She laughed, a low, smooth sound. I remember when you and Marcus used to sneak extra pizza slices from the kitchen when you thought I wasn't looking. I chuckled. We were terrible at being subtle. She nodded toward the kitchen. Would you like something to drink? I just made some tea. This chamomile helps with the cold. I'm good, but thank you. She looked at me for a moment longer, then said, I'll pour you some anyway. You can say no after you've tasted it. I didn't argue. She moved into the kitchen with a slight limp in her step. I hadn't noticed it until now, subtle but definitely there. Are you okay? I asked. She glanced over her shoulder. Oh, just twisted something last week. Slipped on the back steps. It's nothing serious. Just annoying. When I sat down at the kitchen island, she placed a warm mug in front of me. The tea smelled good, calming, like something you'd want to drink under a blanket. We talked, slowly at first, about Marcus, about how busy she'd been with freelance editing work. I found out she worked from home now, mostly book manuscripts and travel articles. She asked about school, about work, about whether I was seeing anyone. That one made me pause. No, I said, a bit more awkwardly than I intended. Not really. She nodded without pressing. Sometimes, being alone isn't the worst thing. She sipped her tea with both hands wrapped around the cup, her shoulders relaxing as the minutes passed. The room felt soft, the light warm. Not bright, not dim, just right. Something about it made me slow down too, like I was walking into a quieter version of the day I didn't know I needed. We didn't talk about anything heavy, but I found myself noticing things, the faint lines near her eyes when she smiled, the chipped edge of the ceramic mug she favored, the way her voice dipped slightly when she asked a genuine question. At some point, I checked my phone. It had been over an hour. I should probably get going, I said, standing slowly. She stood too, leaning gently on the edge of the counter. I'm glad you stopped by, she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. I don't get much company these days. I nodded. I was happy to help. She walked me to the door. As I stepped outside, she called after me softly, Ryan. I turned. Marcus was right, she said. You're dependable. I smiled, gave her a nod, and walked to my car. But something about the way she said it stuck with me. That night, I couldn't shake the image of her standing in the doorway, cardigan wrapped tight, eyes holding something unsaid. I told myself it was just kindness, that it was just tea, that it was just a favor. But I knew even then I'd be back. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. 3 days passed before I convinced myself I wasn't making it weird. I'd replayed that first visit in my head more times than I wanted to admit. The soft light in the kitchen, her laugh, the way she looked at me when she said, I don't get much company these days. It wasn't flirtation. Not exactly. But it felt like something had shifted, like a door had opened that neither of us planned to. So when Friday came and the temperature dropped again, I found an excuse. I texted Marcus, Your mom's heater working okay? Want me to check in? He didn't reply for 2 hours. Finally, she said it's fine, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind. You're the hero now, lol. That was enough. I showed up around 7. I told myself I was just being considerate, that it was about the heater, that maybe I'd stay for another cup of tea. But the truth was I missed the calm. The way her house made me feel like time slowed down, like I could breathe. Her porch light was already on when I pulled up. I knocked once, then paused. The door opened within seconds, as if she'd been standing nearby, waiting. This time, she wasn't in a cardigan. She wore a robe, thick, dark burgundy, tied loosely at the waist. Her hair was down, damp like she'd just gotten out of the shower. A faint trace of steam floated from inside the house. And her expression, for the briefest moment, wasn't surprised. It was something else. Then, in a voice that was almost a whisper, she said, I didn't think you'd really come. I stood there for half a second, not quite knowing how to respond. She looked at me like she'd spoken a thought she hadn't meant to share aloud. I cleared my throat. Just wanted to check on the heater. She exhaled a soft breath. Not a laugh, but close. It's working, but come in anyway. It's cold out. I stepped inside. The warmth hit me immediately, not just from the space heater in the corner, but from the air itself. It smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, like something had been baking. A quiet instrumental playlist played low from the living room. The lights were dim again, soft yellow glows from corner lamps, no overheads. She led me to the kitchen. I just pulled cookies out of the oven, she said, still soft. I followed her voice, not quite trusting myself to look directly at her. She moved with that same graceful control as before. No makeup, barefoot, hair still curling slightly from the moisture. The robe fell just below her knees, the fabric swaying gently as she walked. "Hope you like chocolate chip," she said, placing a plate on the counter. "I do," I said, because it was true, and because I couldn't think of anything else to say. We sat again at the island, each of us holding a cookie and a new cup of tea. There was no small talk this time, no catch-up. She looked at me, really looked, and I looked back. For a moment, the silence felt louder than any words we could have spoken. Then she said quietly, "It's strange how some people bring peace with them." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You walk in and the air changes," she said. "The noise goes quiet." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. I just nodded and she smiled softly, like that was the answer she expected. We talked, eventually, about small things. She told me about her favorite books. I told her about my freelance art projects and how I sometimes hated what I made 5 minutes after finishing it. She laughed at that. "Do you always talk like this?" she asked. "Like what?" "Honest. Unfiltered." I shrugged. "Only when I feel like someone's really listening." That made her pause. Her gaze softened. "I'm listening," she said, and I believed her. We didn't talk about Marcus, or about the fact that I was his age, or that she was old enough to remember dial-up internet and I wasn't. None of that seemed to matter in the quiet space we'd created. Eventually, she stood. "Do you want to see something?" "Sure." She led me through the hallway toward the back of the house, a side I hadn't seen. A small room, maybe once an office, had been converted into an art studio. Not for painting, but journaling, writing, doodles. The walls were lined with quotes, sketches, post-its, half-filled notebooks. "It's my escape," she said. "It's beautiful," I said. She sat down on the edge of a small couch by the window. "No one's been in here in years." I leaned on the doorway. "Why not?" "No one ever asked to." She looked up at me again, and something changed. Not drastically, not suddenly, but like the air thickened. She reached over to the nearby table and grabbed a small frame. It held a photo of her and Marcus, maybe 10 years ago. She looked younger, but sadder somehow. "I used to think that when Marcus moved out, I'd feel free," she said. "But freedom without company. It's just loneliness with more space." I stepped in, sat beside her. She didn't move away. The room was so quiet I could hear my own breath. She looked at me, not just with her eyes, but with something deeper, a kind of searching that made my skin buzz. "Why'd you really come tonight?" she asked, voice low. I met her gaze. "I don't know." But we both knew that wasn't true. She didn't press. Instead, she whispered, "I'm glad you did." I nodded. We sat there for a while. No touching, no lines crossed, but the distance between us felt charged, like a string stretched taut between 2 points, vibrating with everything unspoken. Eventually, I stood. I should go. She nodded, standing with me, walked me back to the door. This time, when she opened it, she looked colder. The night air had settled in, the sky cloudy and dark. "I'll see you around?" I said. "If you want to," she replied. I turned, stepped onto the porch. Then I heard her voice behind me, soft, unsure. "Ryan." I looked back. "I didn't think you'd really come," she repeated. This time I didn't look away. "I didn't think I would either," I said. And I meant it. But I also knew I'd be back. Because something was beginning. And neither of us wanted to stop it. I didn't go back the next day. Or the one after that. I told myself I needed space, to think, to get perspective, to stop overanalyzing everything she'd said and how she'd said it. But the truth was, I wasn't confused. I knew exactly how I felt when I was around her. Calm, seen, wanted. It was the kind of connection I'd never felt before. Not with someone my age, not even in past relationships. Vanessa wasn't trying to impress me. She didn't play games or pretend. She just existed quietly, beautifully, and something about that pulled me in. By Thursday, I couldn't take it anymore. A storm was moving in. A full-on thunderstorm, gray clouds sweeping over the city like a warning. I hadn't planned to see her. I hadn't texted. But when I left work, I didn't drive home. I drove straight to her street. The rain started while I was halfway there. A steady, heavy kind of rain that blurs the windshield and forces you to slow down. When I pulled up to her house, I could barely see through the downpour. I parked, turned off the engine, and just sat for a moment. Heart racing, hands gripping the wheel. What was I doing? But I didn't turn around. I got out and ran through the rain. No umbrella, soaked within seconds. The porch was dry, but I was already dripping. I knocked once. The door opened before I could knock again. She stood there in the same robe. Dark burgundy, soft fabric wrapped around her like she'd just gotten out of the shower again. But this time, her expression was different. Not surprised. Not uncertain. Soft. Quiet. Like she'd been holding her breath and only just exhaled. "Ryan," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't say anything. I was soaked. Water dripping from my hair, shirt clinging to my skin. She reached for a towel hanging on the hook by the door and handed it to me. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." I walked in slowly. The air was warm, scented with lavender and something deeper. Maybe the faintest trace of perfume she'd worn earlier. A small fire crackled in the fireplace, casting flickering light across the room. She didn't ask why I'd come. She didn't need to. I dried my face, then stood awkwardly near the couch, not quite sure where to go. She looked at me, head tilted slightly. "You didn't text." I didn't want to overthink it. Her lips curved slightly. "Good." She walked into the kitchen, poured 2 mugs of something warm, and returned with them. Handed me one. I sat across from her on the couch, both of us silent, listening to the rain pounding the windows. The tea was chamomile again, the same comfort from that first night. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. I just couldn't stop thinking about you, this everything. She looked into her mug for a moment, then met my eyes. Me too. There was something fragile in her voice, like this admission cost her something. But she said it anyway. "I don't want to pretend I don't feel it," I said. She exhaled slowly. "Neither do I." The silence that followed was heavier than any conversation we'd ever had. She reached forward, gently placed her mug on the table, then sat back. Her robe shifted slightly as she moved, revealing her collarbone, the curve of her shoulder. She didn't adjust it. I set my mug down beside hers. Our eyes met, and we just sat there, two people balanced on the edge of something neither of us had planned. Finally, I said, "Tell me to leave and I will." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. Her hand reached out, fingers brushing mine. That one small touch sent a spark through me. Not because it was electric, but because it felt inevitable. "I'm not going to tell you to leave," she whispered. So I didn't. She shifted closer. Her hand rested lightly on my knee, not with urgency, but with certainty. Then she said, "Do you ever feel like you've been waiting for something you can't name?" I nodded. "Yeah, all the time." She looked at me, really looked, and then leaned in, her voice softer than ever. "I don't want to be alone tonight." My heart raced. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I leaned in too. When our lips met, it wasn't hungry or desperate. It was slow, deliberate, like we were asking permission with every second. Her fingers slid up to my jaw. Mine found her waist beneath the robe. There was no rush, no panic, only warmth. She tasted like tea and something sweet I couldn't place. And when we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested against each other, both of us catching our breath. Her eyes fluttered open. "I've never done anything like this," she said. "Me neither," I whispered. She stood slowly, taking my hand, and led me down the hallway without a word. The firelight danced behind us. The rain grew louder. That night we didn't talk. Not after the door closed. Not while the storm raged outside. We didn't need to, because something unspoken had finally become real. And in that silence, in the warmth of her skin, the curve of her back, the rhythm of her breath, I knew we'd crossed the line. A line we couldn't uncross. But in that moment I didn't want to. Neither did she. The days that followed blurred into something that didn't feel real. We didn't call it anything. Not a relationship. Not a secret. Not even a mistake. But the rhythm changed. I started showing up without an excuse. She started leaving the porch light on even when it wasn't dark yet. We didn't talk about the stormy night, not directly. But it hung in the air between us like a second presence. A truth that didn't need to be spoken to be felt. I still brought groceries sometimes. I still sat at her kitchen counter while she made tea. But there were differences. Her hand brushed mine more often now, and lingered. She'd sit beside me instead of across. We'd talk late into the night, knees touching beneath the table, never moving apart. The fire was always lit. The music was always soft. Her robe was replaced with sweaters that hung just right off one shoulder, sleeves pushed to the elbows, like she didn't mind being seen anymore. And I did see her, not as Marcus's mom, not even as someone older, just as her. Vanessa, the woman who looked at me like I was a calm in her storm, and who, in turn, gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing. Being wanted for who I was, not what I could become. But reality doesn't stay suspended forever. One Saturday afternoon, I came by to drop off something Marcus had left in my car. I knew he'd be out of town until Sunday. Vanessa hadn't texted, but I wanted to see her anyway. When I pulled up, her car was in the driveway. So was another one. A silver Honda I recognized immediately. Marcus. I sat in my car, frozen. Maybe he'd come back early. Maybe he forgot something. I gripped the steering wheel, pulse thudding in my ears. This was the moment I'd been avoiding. Not because we'd done anything wrong in that moment, but because everything before it had led us here. And this could ruin everything. I backed out quietly and drove away without knocking. That night, she texted, "I didn't know Marcus would stop by. He surprised me." I didn't reply right away. Eventually, I sent, "It's okay." She replied, "We need to be careful." Those words hit harder than I expected. Careful became distance, not cold, not rejection, just less. Fewer messages, fewer long visits, fewer touches. The warm space we'd built started to cool, even though neither of us had the heart to shut the door completely. One evening, I knocked out of habit. She answered in a soft gray sweater and jeans, her hair tied up. The smile she gave me was familiar, but quieter. "Hey," I said. "Hi, Ryan." We stood there, neither moving. Finally, she stepped aside. "Come in." We sat in the living room again, tea between us. But this time the silence wasn't charged. It was cautious. I looked at her hands. They were folded tightly in her lap. "I miss you," I said quietly. She closed her eyes for a second. "I miss you too. But," she swallowed, "but we can't pretend this lives in a bubble." Her voice cracked on the last word. I nodded slowly. "You mean Marcus?" "I mean the world," she whispered. She looked up at me, tears held back by sheer force of will. "I don't regret anything," she said. "Not one moment." "Me neither. But I don't want to hurt him, or you, or myself." "What we had," I said. "It mattered." She reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. "It still does." We sat like that for a while, hands barely touching, eyes holding all the things we didn't know how to say. Then she stood. "I need time." I stood too. "I'll give you that." At the door, she paused. "You changed something in me," she whispered. I could say the same. She stepped forward then, arms wrapping around me in a slow, aching hug. Not romantic, not passionate, a goodbye. Or maybe just a promise that something real had happened, even if it couldn't last. "I'm going to be okay," she said, voice low in my ear. I never doubted that. She smiled against my shoulder. "Good night, Ryan." "Good night, Vanessa." And I walked away, not rushing, not looking back, knowing if I did, I might never leave. Weeks passed. We didn't speak. I saw her once at the market. She waved. I waved back. Nothing more. The silence between us wasn't bitter, just quiet. Sometimes I walked past her street at night. I'd glance toward the porch and wonder if the light was ever left on by accident. Or maybe just for me. Sometimes I'd remember her voice in that doorway. Soft, unsure, beautiful. "I didn't think you'd really come." And how I did. Not just that night, but every night that followed. And how, for a little while, in the warmth of her presence, I'd found something I didn't even know I was missing. And I don't regret it. Not for a second.